Hey, what's going on guys, my name is InTheGamerTag and I'm back for your daily Fortnite video. Now in today's video, I'll be discussing with you guys the best Fortnite controller settings. If you guys are going to enjoy today's video and or find it helpful, I would appreciate a like down below. Now on the contrary, if you genuinely dislike today's video, feel free to leave a dislike, and I'd appreciate a comment with constructive criticism on terms of what I can improve on in future videos. Also, if you're new around here and would like to be notified whenever I come out with more daily Fortnite content like this in the future, then feel free to subscribe. With that out of the way, let's hop right into today's video. So as mentioned in today's video, I'm once again going to be sharing with you guys the best controller settings for you on Fortnite. Now to be quite honest with you guys, this is about one of the most important parts in terms of making yourself the best that you can be at the game. And reason being is, I'll use an example. Let's say you take one of the best controller players on Fortnite, whether that be someone like Faceway or GhostX or whatever the case might be. Let's say you take one of these really good players on controller and you just completely mess up their settings. Let's say you turn the sensitivity all the way down and change a lot of the settings that they usually have on. Well, obviously they're going to perform really badly, if not replicate the game style of a complete noob and or beginner. So you could be a really good player and not even know it because your settings is completely off. So that's why today's video I find it to be very important. And I can't necessarily show you guys like what setting to use and tell you exactly what to do, because for each person their preference is going to be different, and what they're comfortable with obviously is going to vary from player to player. So in this video rather, I'm pretty much going over how to optimize your settings. I'm going to share with you guys my settings as well, but again, how to optimize your settings and pretty much find your sweet spot, I guess you could call it. Now there's a few things I'm going to be focusing on, and also kind of giving you advice on a couple other things and guiding you in a certain direction for those settings. Now the first setting I'm going to be talking about is sensitivity. Then we're going to move on to keybinds, and then lastly we're going to talk about dead zones. And once again, in between that, I'm going to give you guidance on certain other settings that I find to be very useful and that I'd recommend you turn on. So first off, we have sensitivity. And sensitivity is probably one of the most important factors, if not the most important factor, for settings in general. Sensitivity obviously is going to help you with your accuracy and or aim in Fortnite. You could have a really high sensitivity and miss all of your shots. Your accuracy is going to go really down and decline at a rapid pace, while other people are going to have a higher accuracy than you. They're going to win just about every 1v1 and you're going to constantly get eliminated. Now if you have too low of an accuracy, you're not going to be able to keep up with players when they're moving around or moving at a quick pace. Your sensitivity is going to be way too low, and once again you're going to find yourself losing just about all of your 1v1s and consistently getting eliminated. So finding the sweet spot for our sensitivity is going to be very important. Once again, it's going to improve and increase our accuracy. It's going to allow us to win all of our 1v1s, or at least most of them, and we're not going to consistently get eliminated by everyone that we run into every single game. So sensitivity is very important, and quite honestly this is why a lot of content creators or streamers in general are constantly being asked about what settings they use, specifically controller players. Now as far as what I use for sensitivity, my X and Y sensitivity are both set to 0.73. And now the X and Y sensitivity has a range from 0 through basically 1.000. It used to be a 1 through 10 scale, but they've now changed it to have a third decimal point. I'm really not entirely sure why, it's completely useless, but for whatever reason they did it nonetheless. So once again, my X and Y are both set to 0.730. And X and Y basically refers to your general free aim. So when you're not aimed down sights with a weapon, or basically when you're looking around, this is what it'll affect. And also this will definitely more than likely pertain to when you're using a shotgun in close range gunfights, if not medium range. This will also affect things like your accuracy with pumps and tacks, basically close range engagements, because this is what you're going to be using. More times than not, you're going to be basically free aiming while using these, opposed to consistently aiming down the sights. So X and Y again is going to basically affect your free aim, which is more than likely going to impact your pumps and tacticals. So finding a very good sweet spot for this is going to be very important. The best way to find the best sensitivity for you, so keep it at what you have it at right now, and just go in the game and test it out. If you're finding the accuracy is too low when you're like missing a lot of your shots, then try lowering it, and if that even makes it worse, then raise it a little bit more, and basically continue doing that, increasing and decreasing your sensitivity, and eventually you'll find the perfect spot for you. Once again, for me, I currently have it at 0.730, and this is what I find to be the best and optimal sensitivity for me. Next we have the controller targeting sight, and this is basically when you're aimed down, otherwise known as ADS. And once again, I'd recommend to do the same sort of method to finding your sweet spot. Basically go in a game, see how it is, and if you're missing a lot of your shots, then lower it, and if that makes it even worse, then raise it and keep going back and forth until you eventually find the sweet spot for you. I believe I have mine set as 0.360, and this is about the average for pro players. I actually think more pro players have it a little bit lower at around 0.3, but again, I have mine at 0.36, and this is what I find to be the best for me. And then we also have controller scope sensitivity, and this is basically when you're aimed down with a scoped item, and these are obviously used a lot less than the other sensitivities. It's not very common that you aim down in a scope consistently in a game, and I find this to be probably the least important because, of course, when you're aimed down and taking your shots at someone, you're not consistently moving. You simply aim it to where you need it, you rest it right there, and then you take your shot and leave it at that. I mean, I wouldn't really recommend changing this and trying to optimize it. If you like to, you can do that for yourself, but you more than likely have it at what you want it right now. So that is it for the sensitivity settings. Again, you can use mine that I discussed, or you can do what I said basically and try to optimize it to your perfect and or sweet spot for yourself. You will definitely see an increase and improvement rather of accuracy and just general gameplay from yourself. Accuracy, once again, is one of the most important factors in becoming a really good player, or at least maintaining that decent player status. Now moving on to a couple other settings that I find to be very important, and I'll discuss them in a little bit further detail throughout the video. Now the most important setting that I have on that I recommend every player should have on is sprint by default, and this is pretty self-explanatory. Typically, if your settings are set to basically the original settings or the default settings, I suppose you could say, then basically in order to sprint you need to click down on the left analog stick, where sprint by default eliminates that. Basically whenever you run, you're automatically sprinting, and there should really never be a time where you're not sprinting in Fortnite, to be completely honest, unless you are crouched. So to have sprint by default on is going to be very important, especially if you use keybinds similar to mine, which again I'll discuss here in a couple minutes. Now another setting I find to be very important is to have the tap to interact, or search rather. Basically what this setting does, so when you open an ammo box or a chest in general on Fortnite, you have to hold either X or square to open it, and you have to hold it the entire way through until it's completely open. Whereas tap to search or interact, basically all you do is tap X or square and basically it'll open it from simply by tapping it. So you're doing less work to open it and or tap it. So I've turned the setting on at the day it came out, and I've never gone back, and I really don't ever want to go back to the other setting because obviously this makes it a lot easier. Once again, instead of having to hold it all the way through until it opens, you simply tap X or square and basically the chest or ammo box will open once you tap it, opposed to holding it all the way through. And this again isn't a really crucial one, it's just one that I find to be a lot more helpful and it'll basically make it a lot easier on you. And there's a couple other settings that I'd recommend you have turned on, however I'll discuss that a little bit further in the video and you'll see why. Now moving on, we're going to go to keybinds. Essentially what this refers to is what you bind certain, buttons for. So for instance, my Y button is set to edit, where usually it'll be set to like holding B or circle. So keybinds just make it a lot easier and allow you to be a lot faster and smoother with your gameplay. Now one of the most common questions I get is basically a video about my keybinds, which I might maybe have a video in the future specifically set to my keybinds. But a lot of people want to know my edit button, and a lot of people always want to try to change the edit button because edit plays look very clean and actually allows you guys to almost put yourself in an advantage against other players. Now once again, my edit button is set to Y, and if you're on PS4 that would be triangle for you guys. And I use Builder Pro, which I recommend literally everyone should be using. If you're on Combat Pro or old school for whatever reason, definitely go ahead and make the change. It's going to be a little unnatural at first, but you'll get used to it and you will not regret it at all. Now the reason I have my Y set to edit, well originally, basically if you're on Builder Pro and you have the default settings for that, in order to edit you have to hold B. And B is also the same button that allows you to build. So it's kind of a little bit difficult and something I find to be a little bit complicated. So sometimes when I used to press B to build, it would accidentally edit what I was about to build, and I just found a lot of complications with it. So I try to find different keybinds for my edit button, and I actually got set on Y, or again for PS4 that would be triangle. I use several other buttons. I use like X and A and the D-pad even, and I didn't find those to be useful for me, and I just found it a lot better to use Y because Y is right there. So basically in order for me to edit, I simply just tap Y and I'm already able to edit, opposed to having to hold B. And sometimes when I'd hold B, it would bring out the blueprints for when I build. It would just, again, create a lot of complications that really wasn't needed. Now the difficult part about setting keybinds is it's going to be so unknown for you, or unnatural rather. It's something you're not going to be used to, and again it's going to feel completely unnatural and you're going to be not that good with it at first, but it's something that over time and maybe after a couple of days you're going to get used to it, and eventually you'll have godlike editing speed. And trust me, this was like for me, when I first binded my Y to edit, my edits were unbelievably slow and I was constantly rethinking my decision and wanted to go back to the default settings for Builder Pro. However, after a couple of days, I eventually got used to it, and now I find my edits to be a lot faster and smoother than the average player or just what they used to be for me. So this is why I'd recommend Y or triangle for your edit button. A lot of people also use the left analog stick for the edit button, but that's something you can test out for yourself. Now for the people that are curious, my confirm button, so basically when you edit, you make the edit, you have to confirm it. My confirm button is set to B. So it's pretty simple, Y and B are right there, and I'm able to just simply roll my thumb, make an edit, and then confirm it at almost the same time. Now you're more than likely wondering, how do I take out my pickaxe then? Because the default settings for Builder Pro in order to take your pickaxe is by pressing Y or triangle, and as you guys know, that is now my edit button. Well, now my toggle pickaxe button is set to L3, which means clicking the left analog stick in, and this is why sprint by default comes very handy for me. My thumb obviously rests on this button constantly anyways, so it just makes it a lot easier to basically use this for my pickaxe. Whenever I want to take out my pickaxe, I simply click in my left thumb. It's just a lot easier. And that's it for my keybinds. I don't think you really ever have to change a lot of different buttons and have them just like completely ridiculous and very unique. Simply, I would recommend changing your edit button, and obviously if you set it to like Y or something, then you want to change your toggle pickaxe. So once again, my keybinds is Y for edit, B for confirm, and toggle pickaxe is set to L3, meaning clicking the left analog stick in. And this is why we have sprint by default on. Now speaking of Builder Pro, which I talked about a little bit, what I'd recommend you'd have on. There's a setting that allows you for Builder Pro to build immediately. So for Builder Pro, obviously most of you guys know this, in order to build like a wall, you press right trigger. In order to build a staircase, you press left trigger. For all the other settings for building, you have to scroll through the building options, and it's a lot more difficult than Builder Pro. For Builder Pro, you just click one button and it's already built. But the default setting for Builder Pro is you kind of have to hold the button for like a split second. Whereas the setting that is called Builder Pro Build Immediately allows you to immediately build that platform the second you click on it. So it's basically going to allow you guys to have your building at max speed and build immediately. There's really no reason this should be turned off. Now the final setting I'm going to be discussing in today's video is going to be the dead zone settings, and this is something that a lot of people are confused about, as it is a pretty recently new setting that was added to the game, at least for controller players, or console players rather, and there's really no description about it, and Epic didn't kind of give us a heads up about it or kind of describe essentially what it does. Obviously when you go into the dead zone settings, it gives you a short description, but it's something that you only can learn about what it does simply by changing the settings drastically and seeing a change for it. And to give you a general description about it, or a blanket statement rather. Basically what dead zone refers to is the reaction time in a sense, or the zone or placement rather that your analog stick will actually sort of take effect, or be in effect rather. So if your dead zone set all the way up, then it'll react immediately. You're probably wondering, why don't we use this? Well, it kind of messes with your sensitivity in a way, so if you have a really high dead zone, then it's really going to be unnatural and weird for you to look around or move around in general. So I wouldn't recommend anyone to have a really high dead zone setting. What the default I think is set at is 0.27 I believe, or somewhere around there, and I currently have both mine set to 0.20. This is what I find to be the best, and dead zone settings are not something I typically like to mess around with because again, it really affects your gameplay and it's just a very confusing setting in general. And I believe the average pro player has their set at around 0.20. Once again, this is around the default setting for it, so keeping it around here will be probably the best bet for you. Now if for whatever reason you feel like you're better with a really high dead zone setting or a really low dead zone setting, then by all means you can of course use that. I just think in general no one should be using it because of course it'll really affect you with your sensitivity and it'll drastically change your gameplay. So those are all these settings I wanted to discuss in today's video. Hopefully you guys found it helpful and or enjoyable. If you did, once again I'd appreciate a like down below. Also if you're new around here and would like to see more daily Fortnite content like this in the future, then feel free to subscribe as well as turning on post notifications. With that out of the way, my name is Keybinds. Thank you for watching today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow. Adios.